So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Eric Maskin, young men and women of Ishcmc. As an IB World School that embodies the IB mission, we aim to develop inquiring, knowledgeable and caring young people who help to create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. We are exceptionally fortunate to be in the presence of a person who can stand alongside the likes of Nelson Mandela, Jimmy Carter, Dalai Lama, Mikhail Gorbachev, Jose Ramos-Horta, Shimon Peres, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Kim Dae-jung, just to name a few of the patrons of the International Peace Foundation. These names represent many diverse nationalities, just as our own community embraces that diversity on a daily basis. Common amongst all of these Nobel laureates and Nobel Peace Prize winners is their commitment to excellence through a never-ending desire to fail and get up again to do better, not for their own good, but for the promotion of peace in our world. They have overcome many challenges in their fields, and their character strengths have allowed them to forge ahead, even when the barriers seemed insurmountable. It is the courage to challenge the unknown and to push the boundaries of change that make them so immense, not just within their chosen fields, but also in promoting peace in our time. At Ishcmc, we firmly believe that to succeed in growing and developing skills to learn and adapt to our changing world, you must be engaged, energised and empowered. Today, our guest from the United States, Professor Eric Maskin, has certainly demonstrated these qualities throughout his life. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2007 for having laid the foundations of mechanism design theory. He taught at MIT and was the Albert Hirschman Professor of Social Science at the Institute of Advanced Study and a visiting lecturer at Princeton University, before becoming the Adams University Professor at Harvard. Professor Maskin has worked in diverse areas of economic theory, such as game theory, the economics of incentives and contract theory. He is particularly well known for his papers on mechanism design, implementation theory, and dynamic games. His current research projects include comparing different electoral rules, examining the causes of inequality, and studying coalition formation. He is a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Econometric Society and the European Economic Association, and a corresponding Fellow of the British Academy. He was President of the Econometric Society in 2003. His Nobel Prize was in collaboration with two other economists and focused on mechanism design theory, which is a major breakthrough in the modern economic analysis of institutions and markets. It revolutionised the way economists think about optimal institutions and regulation when governments don't know it all. It has had a major impact on current policy making and will continue to do so in the future. Today he's going to talk about something a little different, although connected, and that is why global markets have failed to reduce inequality. This is directly linked to some of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or as Mr. Wright would like to say, SDGs, which in many ways looks to promote equality and peace. It is based on the theory of comparative advantage, which predicts that with expanding global markets, income inequality in poorer countries should decrease. To date, however, the international record on inequality is at best mixed in the face of recent globalisation. In his keynote speech, Professor Maskin will outline an alternative theory that seems more consistent with what has actually happened. Professor Maskin, we are very privileged to have you here today with us, and we look forward to having you speak to us and then answer some questions of our students. Again, thank you for giving up your time to join us in Vietnam and connect with our community. Ladies and gentlemen, Nobel laureate Professor Eric Maskin.
Thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to having a chance to talk with you a bit. I will say a few words about inequality inequality and globalization, but I would like this primarily to be a conversation. That is, I'd like to hear from you, and I know that a number of you have prepared some questions for me, and I hope we can get to them quickly. But since one of the themes that I'm talking about on this visit to Southeast Asia has been inequality, let me tell you a little bit about the work that I've been doing. You're, of course, aware that globalization has been a powerful force for growth in the last 25 or 30 years. A number of countries, China, India, have made enormous strides as a result of globalization. Their GDP have increased by several folds. But globalization has not been an unmixed blessing. Although it has increased average prosperity in many places, it has also increased inequality. That is, it has led to a greater gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and have-nots. And the big question that I've been interested in is why this is and what to do about it. Why should we care about inequality? Well, inequality, to begin with, is a moral problem. If we believe in egalitarianism, and many of us do, the idea that there should be enormous disparities of income, enormous disparities of opportunity, flies in the face of our egalitarian impulses. But even if we don't care about egalitarianism, we may care about the eradication of poverty. And inequality gets in the way of eliminating poverty as well, particularly in developing countries. And then there's a very practical reason for caring about inequality, which is that countries in which inequality is growing tend to be less stable politically, less stable economically. We have only to look around the world and see a number of recent events, Brexit, the election of Donald Trump in the US, the rise of the National Front in Europe, in France, to see how inequality can lead to quite disruptive political change. And if only to give some stability to our political and social system, we should care about inequality. Now, interestingly, one of the best established theories of globalization, the theory of comparative advantage, a theory which has been extremely successful over the 200 years that it's been in existence, predicts, contrary to what we've seen in the recent globalization, that increased trade and increased interaction among countries should reduce inequality in developing countries especially. And let me explain why that's so. Developing countries tend to have a large population of low-skilled workers. That's one reason why these countries are still in the development stage. They haven't got to the point where a large fraction of their population is well-educated and highly skilled. In a country with a large fraction of unskilled workers, international trade gives that country the opportunity to concentrate in producing goods which make a lot of use of unskilled labor. So agricultural goods are a good example of that. You don't need to have a high school education in order to be able to produce rice. So the globalization process has allowed developing countries to concentrate on agricultural goods, other goods for which their labor force is well suited, and then they can import goods which require very high levels of skill, such as computers or computer software. The fact that they're concentrating on these goods where only low levels of skill are needed means that those unskilled workers are very much in demand, and that tends to boost their wages, and that helps reduce inequality. Well, that's the theory. That's the theory of comparative advantage. And it's a theory which I say has been very successful over a couple of centuries. And in fact, that theory worked very well in previous globalizations. This is by no means the only globalization the world has lived through. There have been 3 or 4 others, including a big globalization at the end of the 19th century, when trade between Europe and North America increased dramatically. And in all the previous globalizations, the theory worked exactly right, and it predicted successfully that inequality would be reduced in countries with a high proportion of low-skilled workers. But there's something about this globalization which is different, and that's what my co-author and I wanted to investigate. And our proposal is that the thing that's different about this globalization is that it's involved the internationalization of the production process itself. What do I mean by that? Well, think of computers, for example. Computers are goods which are typically internationally produced. They might be designed in the US, they might be programmed in Europe, and they might be assembled in China, for example. And what is true for computers is true for many, many thousands of other goods. So globalization this time around has meant the internationalization of the production process itself. And that means that the market for labor, for workers, is truly international. You may be an American company or a European company, but you're interested in hiring workers in China or in the Philippines or in Vietnam. But the problem is, from an inequality perspective, is that you're not interested in hiring people who have no skills at all. They can't do anything for your company. So you want people who have at least some skills. Perhaps they know English. Perhaps they had some experience in manufacturing. So those people get the new opportunities that globalization creates. And the people who don't have skills, who are perhaps subsistence farmers out in the country, are left behind. And they're essentially unaffected by globalization. So the skilled people see their wages rise and their incomes rise. And in the case of a country like China, literally hundreds of millions of people have seen their lives improve because they had some skills to offer. But many other hundreds of millions, were left behind saw either no improvement in their incomes at all, or actually possibly a deterioration in incomes. And we've seen an increase in inequality in China. What's true for China is true in many other emerging economies as well. So that's our diagnosis of the problem. And you might then ask, as we have, well, what can you do about it? And our answer is that education and skill training is the answer. And this is in notable contrast with what the anti-globalization forces around the world are saying. These days, the anti-globalization people are rightly pointing out that globalization has led to inequality and has led to many people being left behind. Their solution to the problem is to stop the globalization process, to go back to a previous period without globalization. That, I think, would be a big mistake. It would be a big mistake because, after all, globalization, as I said, does increase prosperity on average quite dramatically. And so to go back to pre-globalization times would be a lose-lose situation. But globalization doesn't reward all people equally. And the key to dealing with inequality, to ensuring that the people down at the bottom of the income distribution see some improvements in their lives too, the key is to give them the opportunity to participate in the global labor market too, to provide them with education, and more importantly, provide them with job training, skill training, which would make them employable. We owe it to them for moral reasons, as I said at the outset, but we also need to do it for practical reasons. Otherwise, the anti-globalization people are going to have their way, and we'll all go back. So, with that very brief introduction to some of the work that I've been doing, I think I will stop, and now we'll get to the part that I've really been looking forward to, which is hearing from you. But thank you for having me here.
Hello. Hi. I'm Kyle. I'm 18. I'm American Vietnamese, and I'm a senior here currently. And my question to you is, in your theory, you talk about how important foreign aid is in development and boosting education. And I would like to ask what economic incentives are given to foreign countries to invest? Yeah, lesser economically developed countries.
Okay, so why should a rich country try to boost skills in a developing country? Well, of course, there are altruistic reasons, but these days in politics, altruism may not be the most important force at work. There's a very practical reason, which is, as I was suggesting, the labor force these days is truly global, and companies are truly global. So if I'm an American politician, I can help American companies by ensuring that they have a bigger supply of skilled workers to hire. That's good for them, that's good for the workers. It's also good as a way of boosting demand for American goods, because with higher income workers in the developing world, there will be more demand for American goods. So that there are a lot of purely self-interested motivations for foreign aid, which boosts education and skills. Good question.
Hello, my name is Greg Chong. Grade 11, and I'm Korean American. According to some economists, income inequality can be reduced through the infancy industry argument by using protectionist policies such as high tariffs and subsidies on developing countries' manufacturing sector until those sectors are developed enough to compete with developed countries.
That's right. You put it very well. So let me back up. I would say most economists, and that includes me, tend to be pretty skeptical about arguments which impede free trade, which get in the way of free trade, because free trade historically, and actually still currently, has been such a powerful way of lifting a country's income. Nevertheless, there are occasionally some arguments which say that at least temporarily it makes sense to interfere with free trade. And the infant industry argument is one. If there's an industry in my country which is just getting going, it's not going to be able to compete effectively on the international level right away. There's a certain amount of learning by doing that new companies, new industries have to go through before they're ready to face global competition. And so, as a temporary measure, it makes sense, it can make a lot of sense to protect that industry. But the difficulty is that once protectionism is in place, it tends to stay in place too long. So yes, there is a good argument for a temporary boost to the new industry that's getting going by giving it some protection. But equally important, once that industry gets up to speed, it's important to remove the protection so that you're not giving an unfair advantage to that industry. Unfair advantages can be just as bad as unfair disadvantages. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Juben. I'm 18 years old and I'm a Korean student. And basically, I would like to ask about the relationship between incentives and inequality, to find out whether inequality may act as an incentive for the upper class to work harder to maintain their wealth, and perhaps the working class to work harder to reach higher levels of wealth. And basically, I would like to ask whether you see inequality as a detrimental factor to the economy.
Very interesting question. So can we see something good in inequality as well as something bad? And I think the answer is clearly yes. Inequality can be a the top who have already made it, but for people down at the bottom who are hoping to make it. If you see someone else with a great deal of success, you may say to yourself, why can't I do that too? And this is the root of what's sometimes called the American dream. The American dream is the idea that no matter where you start, no matter how lowly your family, you, by working hard and also using your imagination and creativity, you can achieve the same success as our great success stories. So John D. Rockefeller, for example, who created Standard Oil in the 19th century, came from pretty modest means to the biggest fortune the world had ever seen. And there's a good case to be made that he was driven to success by inequality, by his determination to move himself from the bottom to the top. And that certainly remains true today. The problem with inequality is not the fact that different people end up with different outcomes, but that in so many cases they don't even get to the opportunity to try in the first place. So I'm certainly not arguing for a world where we have equality of outcomes, but I am arguing for a world where we have equality, or something resembling equality of opportunity. It's opportunity that's the key. And so to go back to what I was saying before, and to this globalized labor market that has rewarded people with skills but not people without skills. The people without skills would love to be able to join that labor market, but they don't have the opportunity. They have nothing to offer. And you might say to them, well, why don't you go get some skills or get some education? But of course, that's out of the question for them. They can't afford it. They don't. Education and skill training is expensive, and they don't have the wherewithal to pay for that. So someone has to help them with that. Someone has to provide them with opportunity. Once they have the opportunity, then they're in business, and that's really the point that the work I'm doing is trying to make. But thank you for raising that interesting question.
Hi, I'm Kai, I'm 17. Would you agree that inequality is perhaps impossible to eliminate, is perhaps quite necessary in a free market capitalist economic system? I mean, low-level jobs and low-skill jobs would always be in demand, for example, agriculture, but it's perhaps unrealistic to only have high income and high skill jobs.
Very good points. It is unrealistic to expect that there will only be high-skilled jobs and high-income jobs. And I would never, I didn't mean to suggest that there should be. So decreasing decreasing inequality is not the same thing as eliminating inequality. You're quite correct that under a market system, we're never going to eliminate inequality, nor should we want to. That's not only an unrealistic goal, it's not even really a desirable goal, because we want to reward people according to their talents and according to their resourcefulness and according to their efforts. And that's inevitably going to lead to some disparities in income. But as I was saying in answer to the previous question, we want to give people at least the opportunity to have a chance at a better life. They may not make it, but they should at least have the chance to get there. There's another reason for paying particular attention to education and skill training in our modern world, and that is the increase in replacement of low-skilled jobs by machines. You're all aware of that fact. More and more old jobs will be eliminated. Low-level jobs will be eliminated, which makes it all the more important that people have some basic education, allowing them to be retrained for the new jobs that will come along. I have confidence that robots are not going to replace us, but they are going to create a demand for new skills that are very hard to anticipate. We don't even know now what those skills might be. That makes education, basic education, more important though, because if you give someone a basic education, they're able to adapt to whatever comes along. If their current job gets eliminated, well, they can move on to a new one. So literacy, for example, is the sort of basic education skill that makes retraining possible. So yes, you're absolutely right that eliminating inequality is an unrealistic and perhaps even undesirable goal. But education and skill training are going to become even more important in the future, despite the persistence of inequality. Thank you.
Hi, I'm 17. You talk about how robots going to replace low-skilled jobs in the future. Do you believe there's a quota on employment? And you think that having robots replacing these kind of jobs, you think that they're gonna make the economical stimulus a little bit slower because you don't have people who have incomes and pay for the products anymore? So do you think there's a quota on employment?
So let me be, you're asking a good question. Let me be clear that when I talk about robots replacing jobs, low-skilled jobs, I'm not suggesting that the people who have lost their jobs will remain unemployed forever. There'll be some transition period where they retool and reemerge in some other line of work. And so I don't think we need to have policies such as employment quotas, or at least if we do have them, we're not going to need them permanently. We might be able to use them as a temporary measure to ease the transition from one kind of work to another, in the same way that we might use protective tariffs for industries as a temporary measure. As a long-term measure, I don't think it makes sense to insist, for example, that company hire so many human workers, if that's what you meant by an employment quota. If it's inefficient in the long run for companies to be using human workers, well, they shouldn't be doing it. I don't think, though, that's going to mean that human labor will come to an end. And to back up that assertion, let me use a historical example. You may have learned in your history classes about the great industrial revolution of the late 18th century, early 19th century in Europe. Well, that was a revolution which brought in a lot of new technology, a lot of new machines, just as is happening now. And many people said, well, this is going to mean the end of human labor. Human beings are going to be replaced by machines, the cotton gin, paper, sewing machines are going to get rid of the need for human employment. Didn't happen. In fact, just the opposite happened. In the 19th century, wages rose by the fastest rate that they ever had in human history, because the new technology actually increased the demand for human beings to work alongside these machines. Well, of course, it's too early to say what the latest technological revolutions will lead to. But if history is any guide, and history usually is a pretty good guide, we don't have to worry that these new machines, these robots, are going to eliminate human employment. They're going to eliminate old jobs. We didn't, after the sewing machine came along, we didn't need so many people to sew by hand anymore. But there were plenty of new jobs that came along, which replaced the old ones. So I'm actually pretty optimistic that we'll have some jobs to look forward to years from now. But they won't be the same jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Diksha, I'm Indian. So we know that you have laid the foundations of mechanism design theory. So how did the idea of the mechanism design theory arise first?
So how did mechanism design theory come up, get developed in the first place? It wasn't my idea. I mean, I was very happy to become part of it, but actually, in some forms, mechanism design is actually a very ancient study. If you read the Old Testament of the you can see the ingredients of mechanism design. There's a passage in the Bible about Lot and Abraham, who have some grazing lands that they want to divide between the two of them. And their goal is to divide the land in such a way that neither of them is envious of the other's apportionment. So Lot shouldn't envy Abraham, Abraham shouldn't envy Lot. And the question is, how do they achieve this goal? Well, that's a mechanism design question. How do you achieve a fair division, or how do you achieve whatever your goal is when the parties concerned, in this case Lot and Abraham, have to agree on the outcome? Well, it turns out that there's a very clever solution to the problem. How do you divide the grazing land fairly? And that's also in the Bible. The solution is in the Bible. And it's for one of them, say, Lot, to draw a line someplace, dividing one half of the land from the other. And for the other person, Abraham, to choose which of those two pieces he takes for himself. If you think about it, that will solve the problem, because when Lot is dividing the lands, Lot has an incentive to make sure that the two pieces are exactly equal. Why? Because if one of the pieces is bigger than the other, he knows Abraham's going to take that. And we start with the smaller piece, the smaller portion of land. So that's probably the earliest example of mechanism design on record. In recent years, of course, it's been used for all sorts of other allocation problems. It's been used for allocating radio spectrum licenses. It's been used for assigning children to public schools. It's been used to try to reduce air pollution in congested cities. It's been used to try to reduce traffic in places where there are heavy traffic jams. There are literally thousands of potential applications of mechanism design. And I joined the mechanism design business because I was excited about these applications and wanted to be part of it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is AJ. I'm 16 from the West. And I have a question about TPP, which Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson said yesterday that he's open to keeping TPP open as a possible idea that could be implemented. How would TPP being implemented under the way it's written right now affect inequality here in Southeast Asia and in the U.S. for that matter?
You know, a lot has been made out of TPP. But when you get right down to it, I don't think it's going to advance inequality anyplace all that much. I think it's a good idea. I would like to see see it go through. But its effects on inequality not likely to be all that big, probably negligible in the U.S. In Southeast Asia, if anything, it's likely to be positive because we go back to a theory of comparative advantage, which says that increased trade, as opposed to increased global production, works to the benefit of people with low skills. I think TPP could work for the benefit of people with low skills in Southeast Asia. So I hope it goes through, but even if it does, it's not going to affect inequality all that much one way or the other.
Hello, my name is Chingu. I'm 18. So my question to you is, over the past few decades, the Southeast Asian community for the ASEAN has reached immense, magnificent development over the past decades. What policies have proved most effective in development, and which policies will be effective from now on?
Well, you're right that ASEAN has been a big success, and one reason why it's been such a success is that it has used the engine of free trade as a means for development. This is a simple economic principle that if you allow people to trade with one another, they're all better off. But it wasn't until the late 20th century that free trade became a reality in so many parts of the world. And I think the ASEAN nations understood that and helped free up trade, and they benefited from it. As to the future, I think the important thing now is that we not let the downsides of free trade, inequality especially, set free trade back. The solution to inequality is not, as I've already said, to try to stop globalization and free trade. Free trade will continue, I believe, to enrich all the ASEAN nations, but at the same time, something has to be done about inequality. If you look at what's happening in China today, there's considerable social unrest because of inequality. If nothing is done about that problem, that's going to derail the globalization project. So I would say that the two things to keep in mind are keep moving toward a globalized world, but try to do something about the negative side effects, in particular inequality.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm in grade 12, 18 years old, also Korean. It is true that equal world is pretty difficult to achieve, but you have mentioned that a lot of economists strive to give equal opportunities to all individuals, and those in developed nations offer these education or training of skills to those minorities nations. But could it be interpreted that this way of reducing inequality is quite also limited, as inequality is still existent in the developed nations? And personally, I find that it is true that low-skilled labor has relatively low income compared to those that require higher amount of skills. But my opinion is that it is rather the scarcity in the type of work that the employment people offer to such industries that kind of create the differences in the amount of income that they receive. So what are your opinions on how it's quite limited regarding eliminating inequality?
Well, you raised an important question. Assuming that we try to do something about inequality, how much can we actually do? There, I think again, I would turn to historical examples to see how powerful education can be as a tool for eliminating inequality. And let me use my own country, the U.S. as an example. In the 19th century, universal public school education was introduced as a goal and as a reality for all American children up to the age of 16. This turned out to be, and this education was going to be paid for by government, by school districts. So families didn't have to pay for it themselves. This turned out to be, I think, the best investment, long-term investment that was ever made in the U.S. because it created a vaster number of educated and skilled workers. It reduced inequality, not to zero, but it reduced inequality significantly, and it boosted the economy, it made the economy more productive. So that kind of analogy, I think, can be applied to the situation today by investing in education and skills. As you say, we're not going to eliminate inequality, but if the American experience is any guide, we can reduce it and also have made a great investment at the same time.
Hi, I'm Reggie, and I'm 18 years old, and I'm Korean as well. So like you've said previously, inequality can motivate people to improve themselves. And so I'm wondering whether reducing inequality will always be good for an economy, and how is it related to economic growth?
Sorry, how is it related to
Economic growth.
economic growth? Some important issues you touched on there. So I talked about the moral reasons for going on reduce inequality. And the practical reason for reducing inequality, which is to keep the society reasonably stable. But there's another important reason that you just touched on, which is that beyond a certain point, inequality actually interferes with economic growth. If a society is too unequal, you end up with two separate societies, one at the top, one at the bottom. The one at the top might prosper, and the society at the top in China is prospering, and in South Korea is prospering, and the US is prospering. But then if the society at the bottom is separated from this prosperous society, it can stagnate and fail to grow at all. In which case, not only does is the country splintered, but a large part of that country isn't even developing. So this brings me back to the point I was making about the U.S. in the 19th century. One reason universal education turned out to be such a good thing was that it made those unskilled people skilled enough so that they could contribute to the growth of the American economy. And it's not a coincidence that the late 19th century was a period of unparalleled economic growth in the U.S. So there is an important connection between addressing inequality and charging on growth.
Thank you.
I apologise to the couple of students who haven't been able to ask their questions, and maybe if you'd like to wait back afterwards, we can personally ask Mr. Maskin. But unfortunately, Professor Maskin, our school finishes at 3:05, and the students need to head home. But on behalf of the Ishcmc community, we'd like to thank you so much for coming, and I'd like to ask you to come up and make a short and small presentation to you. We thank Professor Maskin for his time.
Intelligent, enlightening words. And as on behalf of the school, I would like to present you a gift so that you'll remember our school for how long?
Forever. Thank you so much.
So, Professor Maskin, if I can just summarise for a quick second, I think you've given us all a challenge. We are those people who have benefited in a lot of ways from globalisation. We are part of the global world. We all live together, work together, because we are part of this world that has connected in lots of different ways. But our challenge is to try and help to reduce the inequality in our world. Many of you will have roles and responsibilities where you can make change, and you can be part of that change factor. So my challenge to you, and I think the challenge that you've set all of us, is how can we make a difference, and how can we help to reduce inequality in our society. So we have one more hand for Professor Maskin for this one. Can I ask your weekend. Can I ask those that ask questions, if you guys come up here, we'd like to have a photo with those of you who asked the questions of Professor Massey. And even those who didn't manage to quite get the questions. So have a good weekend to the rest of you.